See if we can get that accomplished.
What have your lawyers told you about what might happen in court?
There are many possibilities. They don't know. The government may oppose it. The government may not. Judge Koeltl may take it under consideration. We don't know. This is new ground for us, and all we know is that we have to keep on trying, because you ain't beaten till you quit, and we're never going to quit.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Hey, Richard, how you doing? Fine, thank you. Let me run in and see where we're going and what we're doing.
Go get him, Ralph.
They only have room for 25 people. It's a small courtroom. So I would say the people who came with the sign, find somebody to hold the sign, because I think this is a very sign here and down. Okay. First 25 to get
I can stand hold the sign.
Okay, and those volunteers to stand out here and hold the signs, please stand and hold the sign. And we have no idea what it's going to be, what the judge is going to say, but we can't, what's the word for it? We can't stop until we get to where we got to go, no matter what the barriers are. And I hope this isn't a big barrier. It may be, but I know we're going to continue going. And I just came back from Washington after June 17th. I started in front of the White House, and I took a break 4th of July weekend to go visit Lynne in Fort Worth, Texas. And one of the things she said was all she wanted to know was what death looks like. So I say, well, we're not talking about prison anymore. We're talking about death camps. We feel that if she comes back to New York, we can see her life extended a few more years in peace, in comfort, around the people she loves the most, and that's you and me. And so we're here to bring Lynne back so that we can, so that she can join us, because there are many political prisoners. And she says as long as she can sit up in a wheelchair, she's coming out to the demonstrations. But she would rather walk than ride in a wheelchair. So I'm for that. I hope you're for that. Let's get Lynne out and let the courts know that we have not forgotten her, and we will never forget any of our political prisoners. Thanks for coming out. Hey,
Free Lynne Stewart! Free Lynne Stewart! Free Lynne Stewart!
now!
Free Lynne Stewart!
Now!
Free Lynne Stewart!
Now!
Free Lynne Stewart!
Now!
Free Lynne Stewart! Free Lynne Stewart!
And thank you so much, because in Washington, I think for a week it was above 100 degrees and humid. And people came from as far as St. Louis, Rochester, Syracuse, all around the country, and people are promising to come. I hope we will not, I'm being told to step aside, the sign, okay, let me step aside. I hope that we don't have to ask them to continue to come. I hope that we'll be able to call and say, just come visit us all in New York, and then participate in our demonstrations for political prisoners and justice. Thanks again. Free Lynne now.
Free Lynne now!
That's all go back there.
Free Lynne now!
Ooh.
Free Lynne
So
now!
you have it.
Free Lynne now!
So you can
Free Lynne now!
Free and yeah, hold on to this, because after this I'm going to go out there.
Okay.
Free Lynne now!
Hey!
Free Lynne now! Free Lynne now! Free Lynne now! Free Lynne now!
I want everybody to understand that we're going to have a demo along, or a vigil, along with people across the country who have called the vigil for August 1st to support Lynne. And no matter what happens today, we will be back at the park tomorrow, Foley Square, to make people understand that we haven't forgotten any people behind the wall.
4 to 7.
4 to 7. And I noticed as I walked around Washington, D.C., you see what this hat looks like. With the rain and the sunshine, I had many comments about my Mumia hat. And I says, it's the same struggle. Because I would one day wear a Mumia hat, the next day I would have a lettered Courthouse shirt, and then I finally ended up with a shirt with a list of about 30 of our political prisoners. So that people understood I was not there just for Lynne Stewart. I'm there for a principle as per Lynne Stewart's instructions. No more Lynne Stewart demonstrations for political prisoners, and I try to stay as true to that as I possibly can. And so Mumia today, Leonard tomorrow, Sekou Odinga, and you know the list. It moves on, and we have to cut that list down to, and then there will be none. That is no political prisoners. And we can do that. We can do that. We must stay, as Lynn calls it, double and redouble our efforts for freedom, for justice, for the Bill of Rights versus the Patriot Act. And so this is what we are here about today, the Bill of Rights versus the Patriot Act. And in the words of Lynne Stewart, you have no rights you're not ready to exercise, no rights you're not willing to defend. We're going to defend the Bill of Rights. We're going to defend our political prisoners, and we're going to defend ourselves. Thanks again.
Free Lynne!
Free Lynne!
Free Lynne, the people's lawyer! Free Lynne! Free Lynne now! Free them all!
Free Lynne now! Free Lynne now! Free Lynne now! Free Lynne now!
Now you hear me talk a lot, but there were other people who came to Washington to stand with us and to march with us in front of the White House. If they would like to step out and say a word or two, I would very much appreciate it.
Well, I was in Washington D.C. with Lynn with Ralph last week, and Obama goes to South Africa and meets with Mandela and talks about Mandela being in prison and how much he's an image, how much he's a model of resistance. Meanwhile, the hypocrisy is almost intolerable while Lynn is sitting in prison along with all the other political prisoners. It's a shame. But this system, with Obama at the top of it, is not interested in justice. It's crumbling. It's a sign of weakness that they have to lock up political prisoners. We are determined to get them out, and we're determined to free Lynn. Lynn basically took on this case because the government's reach in a conspiracy trial was too broad. That's why she took this case, and she lost the case. The government convicted the blind sheik, but the blind sheik had only spoken. The blind sheik is not different than Anwar al-Awlaki, who spoke against the crimes of this system. He was killed for his free speech, and we have to stay out here, win the freedom for Lynn, because we cannot let this government lock us up for conspiracy charges, a broad reach, an overreach on the part of the government when it comes to conspiracy. They could, if we let this happen to Lynn and the political prisoners, they can reach to the point where people meeting in a street like we are today could be a conspiracy for free speech, a conspiracy for freedom. And the Freedom Soldiers Party stands with Lynne Stewart. We're also working, and we have people in Mexico and the Dominican Republic who are now on Facebook, are talking about Lynn's case in Spanish, and we are committed to internationalizing this campaign as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Free Lynn! Free Lynn! Free Lynn now! And last night I was at the International Policy Center in Washington, D.C., speaking about these very issues. And one of the things I said, I'm looking up and down the audience And yes, everyone in the audience, I got you drift. Yes, everyone in the audience was capable of standing in front of the congregation, and I call it a congregation. Those of us who believe in freedom are limited and a special group. Those who stood in the congregation, every one of them had a story, everyone had fought for freedom, and everyone in that audience was capable of coming up and addressing the audience. And so I see many faces of many movements here, so I would ask people to begin to consider coming up and saying a word or two about our situation and the situation of political prisoners.
Stretch out on the other side.
Stretch out, okay. Rachel, would you like to give us a few words?
Sure. Hi, I'm here in defense and support of Lynne Stewart and all the struggles that she's actually supported and been in the forefront of. My name's Rachel Wolkenstein. I've been an activist and on Mumia Abu Jamal's legal team and political activist, and with the Partisan Defense Committee up until a couple years ago, in which defending political prisoners, class 4 prisoners, regardless of their political views, people who've been oppressed and repressed by the government, for standing on the side of working class struggles, the struggles of minorities. And Lynne Stewart's case is one of going after somebody who has been advocate for political prisoners against the repression of this government. And I want to actually end by saying that people understand here, or should understand, exactly what we're up against. Lynne is being prosecuted by the Obama administration, the first black Democratic Party president, and the law in which she was sent away, ultimately on a life sentence, was one passed by Clinton, who was considered to be the first black president, Democratic Party president. And those laws have been the laws of the capitalist parties of America, whether or not they're Republican or Democrat, whether they are under the color of some sort of more progressive but sort of pro-capitalist policy. And our struggle is a struggle not just to get Lynne free and other political prisoners free, not just a struggle for black rights, for human rights, but a struggle actually for human emancipation, which requires a socialist revolution that respects the rights of all people and is only possible by getting rid of imperialism and capitalism. I stand with Lynne for all of those reasons.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yay!
And I see many other voices here, and I was asked a moment ago, what happened? Why are we here today? Is this a good sign, what's happening? And I say to you, I don't know. But I will tell you, Monday the papers were filed for emergency compassionate release because, as I said, we no longer are dealing with prison camps, we are dealing with death camps. And we have so many of our fellow citizens, those who strive to become citizens in these death camps, that we have to be here to fight to make sure that they do get emergency relief. I could just begin naming a few. The most famous, Leonard Peltier, Tommy Manning, all are dying as we speak. And we must continue working for them. And so we filed our papers Monday. Some people say it's a good sign that here we are Wednesday. 2 days later, I found out last night that the judge had called to speak to the attorney. And so I say, when you speak to the attorneys, we, as Lynne said, must be the attorneys. And one of the lawyers that inspired Lynne was Arthur Conoy, the great constitutional attorney who was very important in the human rights movement, the civil rights movement of America, circa 62, 63, 64, when all of the rights that were passed are presently being taken away as we speak. The affirmative action, our jobs are gone, our homes are gone, our future is gone, and Arthur Conoy said, laws are not made in the court, laws are made in the streets. So here we are in the street to continue to struggle, to begin again, to do whatever, and this is why we are here today. So I hope from our organization in New Jersey. Okay.
Free Lynne Stewart.
Free Lynne Stewart. Free Lynne Stewart.
Free Lynne Stewart. I could say that all day, but those of us who've been in the struggle all the time understand the importance of sticking by Lynne. I've been in this struggle since the mid-1950s, and I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of political prisoners. Many people have been locked up since the early 1960s. People like Lynne and other political prisoners, we must continue to stand by them until we get them all out of jail. And remember, this is an ongoing fight. You're dealing with a wicked and evil system here. Not only oppressing us in the United States, they're probably doing worse worldwide. Millions of people have been killed in recent years by the actions of this government. And anybody who speaks out against it, they come after you. So any of us out here could be called in any day. And this lady just mentioned to me that this reminds you of the MacArthur era. It does, if not worse. Because during the MacArthur era, much of what is legal now was illegal then, even though they were doing it. Now it's legal. They can come out here and get any of us and just lock us up and hold us indefinitely. We have to be aware of those laws and what we up against. But once again, free Lynne Stewart.
Free Lynne Stewart. Free Lynne Stewart. Free Lynne Stewart. Free Lynne Stewart. Free Lynne Stewart. Now. 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 Thank you. There are many voices out here representing freedom. And the next voice will be Deborah Sweet from the Revolutionary Communist Party to talk about their perspective of freedom and justice in America.
Well, I am speaking as a revolutionary, that's for sure. You know, yesterday I was in court on another emergency basis, the verdict on Bradley Manning's case. Our brother Bradley Manning was convicted of very serious charges. And again, I know that Lynne would have been in the courtroom and working on this case if she was available. But she's been writing about it, and she's been there with us, and she's here with us right now. It is so essential that we stand up for every one of these cases, and we stand up for the lawyers who have been fighting for the people all these years. Where would we be if we went into court against stop and frisk, if we get arrested, if we're up against life and death charges like Bradley Manning is, if we didn't have the attorneys fighting for us? We're not going to get justice through this system, we know that, but we can fight for it and we can set possible terms to get a better outcome. I'm very hopeful today that the judge is holding this hearing on such short notice. And I know if it wasn't such short notice, we'd have a lot more people here. Because really, there are tens of thousands of people following the case of Lynne, loving Lynne, and supporting her effort to get back with her family, which is much bigger than Ralph and the grandchildren. Right?
Huge.
Her family is
worldwide.
huge. The family is all of us struggling for humanity
Right
and
on,
justice.
right on. All of us here struggling. And Lynne makes that statement over and over again, to be with their political family.
Right. And on behalf of World Can't Wait, for whom I called people to come here today, it is a worldwide struggle, but it is essential that we here in New York, in the belly of the beast, keep coming out and stay on this no matter what happens in this hearing today. It is absolutely essential to bring Lynne home and to demand justice in this case.
While I was in Washington, D.C., demonstrating for Lynne in front of the White House daily, I would get calls from Lynne in the evening, and she would ask, "How is it going?" And I'd say, "Well, it's awful hot out here." And so she says, "You must take a break." don't wear out the people who are working for our liberation. So she says at lunchtime, take a drive down to Fort Meade, where Bradley Manning is. And she says, that will be your lunch break. And so many a lunch break, I was driving down to Fort George Meade, 30 miles to 31 miles out of Washington, D.C., to stand with the banner and to stand alongside people who were supporting Bradley Manning. And all they could say was, thanks a million for coming down and bringing your signs to stand beside and for the same principle of freedom of speech or information, bringing information and truth to the American public. And so I was there yesterday, and I heard one of the lawyers say, well, there's good news and bad news. The good news, he was convicted of only 2 counts, and the most serious count he wasn't convicted of. And I'm saying, okay. And then when they said he was convicted of 17 and 19, I said, I guess that's the bad news. But the news gets worse when they say his exposure is 130 plus years. Well, how much worse does it get? So we don't know what the results are, what it's going to be, but I'm going to guess with the type of judges that we have had over the years, it's not going to be pleasant. And so we must double and redouble our efforts, in Lynne's words, to make sure that Bradley Manning understands that we all know what's going down and that we are all behind bringing out the truth of this American system, nightmare. Use your own word. And now somebody who has been behind Lynne, I'm not going to say how many years because then you'd know how old she is, but who's been working with Lynne for many years on education, community control, freedom of speech, rights for our political prisoners, Betty Davis.
I'm not going to speak on political prisoners first. I'm going to speak on economic prisoners. I'm going to speak on the fact that we have a society that sets many of our poor and underclass to go to jail. And I'm going to speak of the ones who happen to be female and are in the same situation as Lynne. And would you believe it, it's even worse for them. You don't want to get cancer in an American prison. First of all, they won't diagnose it until it's 18 months too late, the way they did for Lynne. In the civilized world, they call that targeted killing. It's targeted killing of the poor. It's targeted killing of women, which is going on all over the world. But what's happening to women with breast cancer in prison is a shame in a country like this that can afford health care. But then again, we're talking about America, and what one of our heroes, John Henry Clark, said, all of us are political prisoners. Some of us were forced to come here, and some of us chose to come here because we didn't know any better. But there's just minimum security and maximum security. So when the system there tells you we're all in the same boat and that it's a global war, you should have been in Washington, D.C., hearing the people question and talk to Ralph. And all of the letters that Lynne is getting from all over the world as a result of the vigil. Everybody is concerned because America really needs an intervention. Americans have lost the will to fight for humanity and democracy, and their institutions that these boys like Bradley Manning are dying for. At the same time that Bradley is risking his life to tell us the truth, and these boys are over there fighting for oil, we lost the First Amendment. We lost the Sixth Amendment. We lost the right to freedom of assembly. We lost the right to not only speak the truth, we better not think the truth, or they're going to accuse us of being terrorism and terrorists. So from my point of view, you and I, we have no choice. I'm going to leave you with one more fact, and this is why I fight for a public school system. I'll never forget what I learned about World War II. Everything Hitler did was legal. The laws were passed, and they did it under the auspices of their legislature. All right? And that's the point that you learn when you can read and think for yourself, and only a public school system is going to let you do that. And you don't have dissent. That is what Rachel is talking about. If you speak truth to power and you don't have somebody in the courtroom that will tell your story, not the legal story, because there is no law. That's what the Trayvon Martin case means, that they have to obey with anybody who looks like Trayvon and anybody who associates and cares about Trayvon, regardless of their color. So I have no choice but to be here, because everything they're doing, they're telling you it's legal. Just like in the 1600s through the 1800s, slavery was legal. So what kind of slave are you gonna be? Only one kind of slave, and that's a bad one.
I told you, everyone in the audience, or everyone standing here, could come up and give a perspective on freedom and justice. And so, some of us have chosen to sit. So one of the people are going to speak, who's sitting. Henry, could you come up and give us a little your perspective of what we are doing here? Thank you.
Good afternoon, sisters and brothers. I don't have a lot of words to say, but I just want to say this. Every U.S. president, from Washington to Obama, has to expand the empire. If he doesn't expand the empire, he's not doing what he was hired for. We've reached a point in American history where the empire is being stopped by resistance all over the world. And those who fight for oppressed people are being targeted to be silenced, to keep the empire operating. Lynne Stewart is being targeted for her forthright defense of oppressed people over the decades. And we have to keep the struggle going to free Lynne Stewart and all political prisoners. Obama represents the worst of American society. They chose him because of his ethnicity to pull the wool over people's eyes.
Yes.
And we have to be smart enough and determined enough not to buy the hype. The guy is a madman, he's a monster in a Brooks Brothers suit. But we can't forget that he's not our friend, he's not a friend of humanity, in spite of the fact that he drags his wife and kids out every other week to give you photo opportunities. Lynne Stewart has committed no crime worthy of the punishment that she's receiving now. And we must never forget Lynne Stewart and all political prisoners who are being targeted and made to pay the price for being independent thinkers and freedom fighters. We must never forget that. We must spread the word. We must teach our children. The public school system, as well as the private school system, want to brainwash our children into thinking that America is the best thing since sliced bread. BS. We know this to be true. With all the billions and trillions of dollars that exist, there shouldn't be a homeless person here in New York City or around the world or in the United States. And we see how the money is being squandered on war and destruction. They always cry broke when it comes to serving humanity, but they always have the trillions of dollars to prosecute a war that is designed to steal the wealth and the resources of the planet. And we must never forgive them for this. We must never forgive them for the assassinations that they've carried out against our freedom fighters. We must never rest until the United States represents a society that exists on behalf of humanity. Free Lynne Stewart.
Never give up. Free Lynne Stewart. Now, the proceedings are supposedly to start at 3:30. That's in room 12C. And I would suggest those who feel that they have to get a seat should begin filing in now. And Sarah was going to give me a report as to how much space that is. Sarah Flounder from the International Action Center. She has not come down. Maybe they're not allowing people to come down.
I saw her earlier
So if
somewhere.
you were to go in one at a time and go to 12C, that will guarantee you a seat. I think we're fast approaching that moment where to guarantee ourselves a seat, we have to be inside the courtroom. But did you go? How you doing? Yeah, we have to do it again next Thursday, and personally, I was hoping for more. I was hoping for at least an order on behalf of the judge. And what he has done is asked the prosecution whether they will expedite the release of Lynne's records. We say Lynne is dying. The prison says she is not, but we're not going to tell you whether she is. And we're going to drag our feet on releasing her records, even though she has signed and made clear several weeks ago, she personally says, release her medical records to the public, not only to the courts, but to the public, so that they can see our complaint. She is dying, and when they mention, well, the delay in terms of record, and when they talked about denial of access to medical care, they forgot to mention when she was on these steps and we had scheduled an operation in New York City, they said, well, when she goes to prison, she can get the operation. Well, it was 18 months later, and she could not sit down. The only position she was comfortable was lying on her back. And this is expeditious medical care. And once they discovered cancer, it was 4 months later before they began to treat it. And the judge says, we don't know whether we can force the prison to release her records. And so anyway, we have this problem in terms of the judge. And so...
Killed by your government.
Okay, thank you.
Goddamn tax-paying robot.
Chris, if you got any,
Because they are killing our sister Lynne, the people's lawyer, and they're talking about blocking the sidewalk. Well, there's a little more to this than blocking the sidewalk. What they have done inside the court are blocking justice, blocking the Bill of Rights, blocking anything of decency. But Ward Churchill has told us, do not ask for decency from people who have none. And so now we are here, we will be here tomorrow, and then we will be back next week. It is a Thursday with the court, next Thursday at 2 p.m. to see what we have to say. But I see Bob over here, an attorney who might give you some more direct legal terms in terms of what we just saw today.
And did you talk about the rally?
Well, you tell us what happened today.
Lynne has filed a motion before the court to either vacate her sentence that was imposed or to resentence her to time served. And essentially the motion is premised upon her medical condition and the denial of the Bureau of Prisons of her application for compassionate release. It was denied on the grounds that she may, and I put that in quotes, have 18 months or more to live, which they've retreated from since then, which is an arbitrary cutoff and which has no basis in the law. So what we're asking Judge Koeltl to do is to, under the context of her criminal conviction, because he did not know when he sentenced her to 120 months, up from 28 months, he expected that there was going to be, if her health deteriorated, that the Bureau of Prisons would comply with its own regulations and make a motion for compassionate release, which they are, the law gives them the power to do if her health would deteriorate, and they've refused to do so. What's significant, I think, about this case is that I think, most importantly to the public pressure, the officials at her prison recommended that compassionate release be granted, which is extremely rare. And that was really, I think, the result of a lot of people in the street, the defense committee, the people around the world who did that, and it was overruled, and from what I understand, on an almost unprecedented move by Charles Samuels, the director of the Bureau of Prisons, who unilaterally overturned or refused to go to court to actually secure her release. So that's just another example of how the situation is arbitrary. Lynne Stewart, even from the time she was arrested, even the government has never said she was a threat to anyone's safety. And so what really basis can they have in her condition to keep her incarcerated? It's inhumane, it's cold, it's all of that. I could go on and on, but I think I think that the judge today, in giving an expedited scheduling, is treating it seriously at a very minimum, and hopefully we'll do the right thing next week.
So what is going to happen next week? What's the next step? How soon could she be released?
I would think that the motion is going to be substantively argued next week. He could potentially rule then. He could decide he wants to have a hearing. He could decide he wants to have more papers. But I think you saw from his attitude on the bench today that he wants this to go quickly, which, it's always good to push lawyers to go quickly, right?
Quickly, a week, she could be dead by in a week.
Quickly, we're going to be back next week.
And how do you compare that attitude to the attitude at the previous hearing where she was sentenced to the additional 10 years? Has the attitude changed?
Well, it's the same. No, it's the same. This is a totally different issue. It's the same judge, and we do. But he's also the judge that gave her initially 28 months, and who looked at her in court and said, I do not want Lynne Stewart to die in prison. We got to throw it back at him. And the best we can do is fight.
What's your name?
Bob Boyle. And Jill Shello was the attorney in court who spoke.
Bob, how do you spell your last name?
B-O-Y-L-E.
Tell them the medical condition. What is the present condition? That's what I'm
Her present condition, she has had a recurrence of the breast cancer. She's a breast cancer survivor. There's been a recurrence, and the prognosis is, what happens when you have a recurrence of cancer. I understand it's very difficult for me, being someone who's known her, being someone who's known and loved her for many years. I'm not just her attorney, to bring myself to say what Ralph just said. It's very hard. Okay.
So,
she is. She's dying.
I just understand how this whole legal proceeding works.
Why do you say he's expedited? Why do you use the word expedited?
The way these courts work, it's not expedited like tomorrow, but the way these courts work, that's almost expedited. So,
So it's set up not to release her, they'll have her die in jail. That's what it comes down to. The rest is
not if we have anything to say about it.
Bullshit. What?
Not if we have anything to say about it.
What legal way next week force him? He says you got to around, she's going to die. That we have to force them to around. Or can he pull another legal loophole? The judge. Let's say you come back next week.
Judges do what judges do.
No, I'm saying, is there any legal way to force him not to pull another legal loophole?
No, it's not.
Judges do what judges do. We make the arguments. If he rejects them out of hand, that's what judges do. Let's hope he doesn't.
Thank you.
He can take as long as he wants.
Yeah, by the way, there's a rally tomorrow. Tomorrow, right here for Lynn at Foley Square from 4 to 7. So let's do everything this week to keep the pressure on. And thank you to the lawyers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You still on, Jeff?
With the government.
Her husband, no, she wasn't in the courtroom. She was supposed to be in Texas, but her husband's right next to me.
How you doing? See you tomorrow. Thank you for coming.
Raging Grannies are going to sing.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for coming. Much appreciated.
Raging Grannies, bring your hats.
Can we bring you on air for Voice of Russia within the next minutes? Yeah. They have your number, I believe, right? Right. Yeah. Yeah, he's available right now.
She was asked by Ramsey Clark to represent her, which she did. And the whole issue of the kind of
Okay, and if
she
you,
made
for whatever
never came up with Bush gets into power and announces that since Ashcroft did they're going to prosecute this terrorist red. So that's not about
An anti-terrorist act separated the branches of law, any law. And when I was screaming, don't you understand we have gone back to states' rights? Nobody got it. That means we reset the legality, the morality of it is in the hands of those who are torturing people. And here we are today. And he says, well, I'll do what I can, and I'm going to ask. Now, Denver says, well, you have no right to even ask. And I didn't hear a hard response from the judge saying, I'm asking and I'm standing on it. Well, I'm going to ask you and do your best. And then Denver's answer was, well, I'm going to do my best. It was not hard and fast. And so we are. And as I say, the struggle continues. See everybody here tomorrow. And I'm going to be back. I'm going to visit Lynne this weekend. I'm going to be back in Washington, D.C., asking all of those people who said we must vote for Obama and hold his feet to the fire, help me build the fire in front of the White House. And I'm going to be there until Lynne comes out or until she comes home in a box. And it looks like their intention here is that Lynne comes home in a box.
What was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction is, I don't know. Nothing hard and fast was said. We're still in limbo here. But I don't know what the courts are going to do. I know what I can do. I know what we can do. We must build a fire by educating the public as to where we are and who we have running this government. Certainly not the person who promised hope and change. You gave us false hope and short change. And we're still getting false hope and short change. And when he said Samuels did an unprecedented thing, and I'm saying, and who is giving Samuelson orders? We know where the orders come from. They come right from the top, Obama and Holder. They are the Justice Department. What is the issue? The issue is Egypt. The issue is freedom of speech. The issue is the Bill of Rights. And we know they are intent on continuing their suppression of freedom. You see, in the last month, the small gains that were made in the 60s, affirmative action, which meant less than 0.7% of black people being effective, they're turning that back under this administration. Where are they going to go? We see where they have been going, and we are the only thing between the people and total subjugation. When I say we, I'm talking about we, the people of consciousness, we, the people who are willing to understand and act on our understanding.